Blade Runner is a film that has defined the science fiction subgenre of cyberpunk. If you don't know what cyberpunk is, it is merely a more urban noir take on science fiction, whereas a lot of science fiction is optimistic and hopeful. Cyberpunk tends to be more pessimistic. Now, a lot of people don't realize this about Blade Runner, a brilliant film by Ridley Scott, but it is actually based on a brilliant novel by author Philip K. Dick. Now, they are very similar. Obviously, a lot of adaptations have differences, but there is a key difference in the questions and messaging of the film versus the novel. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Berry. Welcome to the StudioJake vidcast, where I talk about all things pop culture. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. If you want to support me in the work that I do, head on over to my new website, studiojakemedia.substack.com. The link is in the description of the video. I really appreciate it. It helps out guys like me who try to bring you this incredible content. At least I think it's incredible. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is a 1968 novel by American author Philip K. Dick. And when it first came out, it made huge waves. And by the way, there will be spoilers for Blade Runner, the film, as well as the novel. So get ready, buckle up, we're going to have a good time. So the novel follows Deckard. He is a Blade Runner who is tasked with tracking down these replicants, androids who very closely resemble humans. He goes off on this adventure through the streets, and he is trying to find them. He encounters a replicant who almost fools him. Her name is Rachel, and he succeeds in figuring out that she's a replicant, which kind of disturbs her because she thinks she's a human. These new replicants, designed by the company that is making these androids, they are meant to be almost human-like. Now, replicants on Earth are illegal in some cases. They can only be used off-planet for mining, for cannon fodder, and other such things. So Rachel's very presence is a problem, but he is too busy tasked with tracking down these rogue ones who have committed murder and mayhem to do really anything about her. And he does his detective work, he tries to find clues, and it all leads to a showdown in an abandoned factory. Sound familiar? That is pretty much the plot of the Ridley Scott directed film Blade Runner. Blade Runner came out in 1982, but people had been interested in doing an adaptation of the novel many years before. So 14, almost 15 years later, the film comes out. Now, there was a little bit of a battle because Philip K. Dick didn't really like the early drafts of the script. He thought it veered too far from the novel, and he worked tirelessly to get the script more book accurate. As soon as he passed away, because he sadly passed away during the film's production, or I should say during pre-production, the studio took full advantage of that and completely rewrote the script. A lot of things transferred over, like the basic plot I described. However, they made a lot of changes to it. For one thing, there are multiple versions of the film. None of them are closer to the book. In fact, another author wrote sequels to the book to try to reconcile the plot differences because they wanted to expand on that. A couple of things. For one thing, Deckard is married in the novel. His wife is obsessed with having a real pet. Deckard does have an affair with Rachel. Now, this is less problematic in the films because he is not married, but it poses a problem in the novel. In fact, Rachel jealously tries to hurt his wife at one point in the novel. Another key difference in it is how the rogue replicants are presented. For one thing, you find out that after Deckard has the affair with Rachel, that the female replicant who has been murdering people, she has Rachel's face. Now, in the movie, that's not the case. She looks completely different and even wears like this weird makeup. So that is a key difference there. And also the film is a lot darker. It's a little more hopeful than the book. The book kind of ends where you wonder what's going to happen next, what's going to happen to Deckard and his wife. There's a really cool scene that was left out of the film that I wish they had included, and it's, again, not in any of the versions of the film, where Deckard is called to a certain police station because they claim to have one of his replicants. And it turns out the entire station has been taken over by replicants except for one detective. And he and that detective has to work together to escape the police station. It was a really cool scene, and I wish that they had expanded on it, but that didn't happen. Now, which do I like better? That's a little difficult to say because even though they have a similar premise, similar setting, and even similar characters, although some are left out of the film, they are so different. And I said this in a live stream with Jester Bell, who I've gone on with a couple of times. The film is really good. It's one of Ridley Scott's best movies, but it is a poor adaptation of the novel. And it is not just because of certain things changed or the fact that the film, at least certain cuts of it, are narrated very poorly by Harrison Ford. I actually found out he did that on purpose because he didn't like having to be called back into the studio to read or to add this narration. He didn't like that, so he did it very lazily, which is why a lot of the later cuts take it out. There is a huge difference, though, in the messaging and the questions asked in the film. For instance, Blade Runner asks the question, do these androids have a soul? And that is perfectly clear in the film. Ridley Scott does not try to hide it. That is the whole point of the film. Do these replicants that look human, are they real? Are their emotions pure? Do they have a soul? Is there a soul inside them? Now, Blade Runner leaves it more ambiguous. Its disastrous sequel by Denis Villeneuve, Blade Runner 2049, tries to more blatantly answer the question, and I think it does a terrible job of answering that question. It is not good because they try to answer the questions in the way that a third-year philosophy major at a college might try to answer this question. Blade Runner, like I said, leaves it more ambiguous, especially because some cuts of the film imply that Deckard might be a replicant. They imply that his superiors know about dreams he's been having. There's a scene, because another way you can tell whether it's a human or replicant is how light reflects in their eyes. There's a scene where Harrison Ford's eyes in one of the cuts briefly make that same reflection. So in cuts of the film, you get this idea. And again, Blade Runner 2049 outright debunks this. They're like, no, he's not a replicant. I think that that is a very interesting thing, because if these things have a soul, then is Deckard killing people without any sort of ethics? Is he killing his own people because he might be a replicant? I do not believe mechanical things have souls, no matter how human or lifelike they appear to be. That is just my own personal convictions. But I don't think it's a bad idea for fiction to explore this. Star Trek does it, Ghost in the Shell does it, and Blade Runner does it. There's nothing wrong with asking these questions or presenting your case, or maybe making you inquire about it. That's what fiction is for. It uses false tales to try to describe these things. And Ridley Scott does this here. Do these things have souls? When Harrison Ford has a romantic connection with Rachel, is it real? And like I said, Blade Runner 2049 says yes, but I'm not going to address that film anymore because, like I said, it's terrible. The original film, it's less concrete in its determination of this question. Do humans have souls? Are we just meat robots like the replicants are mechanical robots? Is that the case? That is a very profound question. And I do think Ridley Scott and the screenwriter, as well as the producers, that gave us a really good question. And it is something worth asking. But I find it not that interesting because, again, other sci-fi have done this. They've asked that question over and over again. If you're thinking, well, what's another Cyberpunk? Well, I mentioned Ghost in the Shell, Akira, certainly Alita Battle Angel. That's another great example of Cyberpunk. There's other ones. Look it up. You'll find plenty of Cyberpunk. Some people even consider Batman Forever a Cyberpunk film. So You can look around, you'll find it. Certainly Batman Beyond is cyberpunk. It makes for a very interesting story in that regard. Now, do androids dream of electric sheep, the source material, the novel behind the hit film? It asks a very different question. Does technology make us less human? And in my opinion, that's a way more interesting question. So, they are talking about this a lot in the book. They are talking about how relationships with the replicants, how robots have made life easier for humans. And as a result, humanity has kind of become dour, more pessimistic, more bored, and even less hopeful because a lot of what they do is all determined by this technology. For example, and I mentioned this earlier, Deckard has a wife and she is obsessed with having a real pet. It is something that she wants more than anything. She's trying to get a dog, but dogs are too expensive. She tries to get a cat. Deckard eventually buys her a goat. And at first, she's not thinking the goat is going to intrigue her very much, but it certainly does. She is excited about the goat. She treats it almost as a child. And Rachel, when Deckard, after he has his affair with her, when he tells her he's going to go back to his wife, she actually kills the goat. It's the last time you see Rachel in the book as Deckard confronts her about it, but she brushes him off and leaves. This devastates Deckard's wife, and she kind of tumbles into a depression. This is a major subplot, and Deckard is kind of upset with his wife. He's like, "Let's just get a replicant. Let's just get a replicant." And she's like, "No, no, no. I want a real pet." And Deckard at first is kind of aggravated this, but then as he goes along this big, replicant hunt as a Blade Runner, he kind of understands what his wife is going through, what she is trying to convey to him, that she wants to connect with something real like she is. And eventually he finds her a frog. Like that's how desperate he is to find her a real pet to make her happy again, especially because he feels guilty because he slept with Rachel. There's also another defining moment in this, and that is when he confronts Rachel after their affair. He goes to take out the other replicants, and like I said, one of them, she looks female. I'm saying she because she looks female. He goes to take it out, but as he does, he realizes that that replicant has Rachel's face. And this kind of confuses him for a brief moment, but he does ultimately destroy it. That is something different in the film. In the film, Rachel is unique. She has her own face. And that's kind of the premise and why she almost fools his test. Now, if you're curious about the test, basically, it's all about the eyes. So replicants can fake human emotion, but they can't fake the movement of their eyes. They can't fake a eye reaction. And Rachel's model is supposed to be able to, but Deckard is so experienced, he detects the subtleties of it. And that happens both in the film and the book. When he sees the evil replicant having Rachel's face, that's when he realizes what a mistake he makes, and he chooses to go back with his wife. Now, he doesn't confess to the affair with her, at least not in the novel. I always found that that question was a lot more profound. So, Blade Runner asks, do the replicants have souls? The novel, do androids dream of electric sheep? It asks, does this make us less human? This ability to just fly around in sort of these hover cars. Urban areas have almost completely taken over. There's a scene where Deckard goes and he steps in mud and grass. He takes off his socks and shoes just to feel it because he has lost that basic human connection. And in the age of AI, I actually think it is a more relevant connection, a way more relevant question to ask. And by the way, I am not just pulling this out of my hat. Philip K. Dick actually addressed this. He was invited to give a talk about the themes in the book at a university, and this is what he said. In this 1972 speech, he said, "Our environment, and I mean our man-made world of machines, artificial constructs, computers, electronic systems, interlinking homeostatic components, all of this is in fact beginning more and more to possess what the earnest psychologists fear the primitive sees in the environment: animation. In a very real sense, our environment is becoming alive, or at least quasi alive, and in ways specifically and fundamentally analogous to ourselves. Rather than learning about ourselves by studying our constructs, perhaps we should make the attempt to comprehend what our constructs are made up to by looking into what we ourselves are up to. And in some ways, he even makes the android antagonist way more human than Deckard, who almost seemingly does his day robotically, routine, something that doesn't veer from him except in key moments of the novel. Now, you might disagree with that take. You feel free to if you have a different interpretation of the film and the novel. I would love to know about it. Please let me know in the comment section below. But as for me, I think Blade Runner is one of the most brilliant films ever made and is one of the best films that Ridley Scott has ever made, no matter what version. And again, I've only seen two, so I'm kind of, talking out of both sides of my mouth here. But I think that it was a profound film and a profound story that asks a very interesting question. Do replicants, androids, robots, do they have souls? But like I said, other stories have tried to ask that question. Do these things have some form of humanity? Do androids dream of electric sheep? Ask a different question. Does all this technology make us less human? And in some ways, yes, it does. Like the original cut of the movie, or I should say the theatrical cut of the film, it definitely lays that out and leaves it way more ambiguous, especially with the conclusion of the novel. Now, I highly recommend you read the book and watch the movie. Now, I saw the original theatrical cut and I saw the international cut, which are both very similar to each other. The international cut just has a little bit more gore. They're a little bit more loose with their mature ratings, but they are some of the greatest works. A few people have said that because I love them so much, I would like the final cut. And I believe there's one called the director's cut, but Ridley Scott actually had nothing to do with it. I think there's 6 total cuts of this film. It's very incredible that it went through that journey. Very few films go through that many cuts. But anyway, I digress on that. Read the novel as well, though, because Philip K. Dick, for all of his personal faults, and he had many, just look up his biography, he asked a very important and studious question about humanity and the direction that technology is taking us. So I really think that you would get a lot out of both. But I would like to see a more direct adaptation of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. You could almost do it because, like I said, they change a lot from book to film, and a lot got lost in adaptation. But I still think that Blade Runner has its merits, but I would like to see a more faithful adaptation. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be interesting to see someone, a good director, like, say, a Steven Spielberg or Christopher Nolan, take the themes from the book and actually turn them into movie instead of retooling them to fit what was popular at the time. If you liked that video, be sure to give it a like, share it out to all your friends, leave me a comment, tell me what you think, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. If you want to support me in the work that I do, head on over to my new website, studiojakemedia.substack.com, where you can find even more pop culture articles. You can also subscribe at different tiers that unlock different perks, including being able to pick the topic for here on the vidcast or the website. That's a pretty good deal. Thank you in advance. On that same website, there's a conveniently titled Buy My Books section. You can find links to all of my novels. I've got them all over the place, but they're all available on Amazon.com. Click on the link, check them out, leave me a 5-star review. It really helps out small indie creators like myself. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.